My husband angrily dragged me out of the party, not knowing the guest of honor was my boss. My name is Clara Whitman. I'm in my late 20s, and I work as a marketing manager. Please stay with me as I tell you my story, and don't forget to support our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing with your loved ones. That night was supposed to be one of the most important moments of my career. My company had been planning this gala for weeks, and the person we were honoring was none other than our CEO, Genevieve Price. She wasn't just powerful, she was someone I had always looked up to. I was nervous, but also excited. I had chosen my outfit carefully, made sure every detail was perfect, and walked into the event ready to show my dedication to the company. But from the start, Ethan, my husband, was in a sour mood. He hated these kinds of events, and made it clear he felt out of place among executives and professionals. I tried to reassure him, but his jaw was tight, his eyes scanning the room like he was looking for something to be angry about. As the evening went on, I chatted with colleagues and exchanged polite words with people from other departments. I could feel Ethan's irritation growing with every smile I gave, with every handshake I offered. Then it happened. As I laughed lightly at a harmless comment one of the executives made, Ethan's hand gripped my arm like a vice. His voice was low but seething, accusing me of being too friendly. Before I could react, he pulled me away from the group. My heels scraped against the floor as he dragged me toward the exit. The room fell silent, all eyes following us. And then I saw it. Genevieve standing near the stage, watching the entire scene unfold. My stomach dropped. Outside, Ethan shoved open the door and kept going until we reached the car. He spat accusations at me, saying I embarrassed him, that I was flirting, that my job was only about appearances. I sat there frozen, my heart pounding with humiliation. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. I could only think about my boss's expression when she saw me being dragged out like a child. On the drive home, Ethan kept tearing me down. He told me I owed everything to favoritism, that without him I was nothing, and that I should be grateful he even came with me. I stared out the window, numb, but deep inside something shifted. For years I had swallowed his anger, his control, and his jealousy. But now it had spilled into my career, into the place where I had worked so hard to build respect. That night didn't just humiliate me. It lit a fire I didn't know I still had. Ethan thought he was reminding me who was in control, but what he really did was push me toward the moment I would take that control back. This was only the beginning of a story he never saw coming. The night of the gala started with so much hope for me. It was one of those evenings where I believed everything I had worked for was finally coming together. The company had gone all out, elegant decorations, soft music, everyone dressed in their best. I felt proud just to be there, knowing the guest of honor was none other than my CEO, Genevieve Price. She was the kind of woman people admired instantly, someone who had earned her position through talent and determination. For me, the chance to be in the same room with her meant more than just work. It was a moment to prove I belonged. Ethan walked in beside me, but from the second we arrived, I could sense his discomfort. His hand barely touched mine, his face unreadable, his shoulders stiff. He never liked these kinds of occasions, and I could see he was scanning the room with that familiar look of disapproval. Still, I tried to keep the mood light, smiling, greeting colleagues, and making sure I represented myself well. I told myself his mood wouldn't ruin this night for me. Dinner began, and conversations flowed around the table. People laughed, exchanged stories, and for a short while I allowed myself to relax. I was seated close enough to hear Genevieve's voice, and even that gave me a little thrill of motivation. But then I felt Ethan's eyes on me. Every time I joined in on a laugh or answered a question, his expression hardened. It was like he was keeping score of every word I spoke, every glance I gave. I tried to ignore it, sipping water, adjusting the napkin on my lap, forcing my voice to stay calm whenever I addressed him. But I could tell he was building up to something. His jaw tightened, his hands restless on the table, his silence heavier with each passing minute. I felt like I was sitting next to a storm cloud that was about to break open. And then it did. Without warning, he leaned toward me, his whisper sharp enough to sting. I barely had time to process the words before his hand clamped around my arm. He stood, pulling me up with him. My chair scraped loudly against the floor, conversation stopped, and heads turned in our direction. My face burned as I tried to free my arm, but his grip only tightened. The room froze. My coworkers stared in shock, and then my eyes locked with Genevieve's. She had been mid-conversation, but now she was watching us directly. Her expression was unreadable, but the fact that she had seen everything made my stomach twist. Ethan didn't slow down. He marched me through the crowd, past tables filled with stunned faces. I couldn't say a word. The humiliation pressed too heavy on my chest. In that moment, I felt stripped of all the confidence I had carried into the evening. What was supposed to be one of the proudest nights of my career had just turned into one of the most painful memories of my life. When Ethan pulled me out of that hall, it felt like the ground disappeared beneath me. I couldn't even look back because I knew what I would see. Faces frozen, whispers starting, and most of all, my boss's eyes fixed on me. The weight of that image sank deep into my chest. I had worked for years to be taken seriously, to prove I belonged in that company. And in a single moment, all of it felt like it had been dragged across the floor with me. By the time we reached the car, my legs felt weak. I sat down quietly, my dress crumpled, my arm aching where he had grabbed me. The silence lasted only until he started the engine. Then the words came, sharp and cruel, one after the other. He accused me of embarrassing him, of laughing too freely, of giving too much attention to men at the table. He twisted every polite conversation into something dirty. I kept my hands folded in my lap, staring out the window at the passing lights. I wanted to shout back, to tell him how unfair it was, but my voice wouldn't come out. It wasn't just fear, it was exhaustion. I had heard pieces of these accusations before, always coated in jealousy, but tonight his anger had been put on display for everyone, and that stung more than his grip on my arm. As we drove further, his tone grew colder. He told me I owed everything to luck, that people at my office only tolerated me, and that my so-called achievements meant nothing. He said the only reason I ever got ahead was because others felt sorry for me. Each sentence chipped away at me, but at the same time, something inside refused to accept it. His voice filled the car, but in the back of my mind, another voice grew louder. The one that knew how hard I had worked, how many nights I had stayed late, how much effort I had put into being where I was. I sat still, but inside my chest was a storm I couldn't quiet. Every mile we drove, the anger in me grew, mixing with shame and sadness. My thoughts were heavy but clear in one way. This could not go on forever. I had been humiliated in front of the very people I needed respect from. And worse, I had been torn down by the person who was supposed to lift me up. When we finally pulled into the driveway, he slammed the door and walked inside without looking at me. I remained in the car for a moment, my hand still on the handle, my breath uneven. That night, for the first time, I realized that my silence was no longer protecting me. It was only giving him more power. I didn't know what I would do yet, but I knew something had to change. Sitting alone that night, I couldn't stop my mind from running back through all the years I had spent with Ethan. The fight at the gala wasn't the first time he had tried to tear me down. It was only the loudest. Quiet moments from the past suddenly felt like warning signs I had chosen to overlook. I remembered when we first got married, how he insisted on managing our money. At the time, I thought he was being responsible. He told me it would keep us secure, that I wouldn't have to worry. But slowly, his help turned into control. If I bought something small, like a book or a pair of shoes, he would question me about it. He acted like I was wasting money even when I was careful. Soon, I found myself asking permission before spending anything at all. Then there were his comments, always slipped in so casually that I brushed them off. If I got a compliment at work, he'd say people were only being polite. If I shared good news about a project, he'd remind me not to get too proud because it could be taken away at any time. I used to tell myself he was just being realistic, but deep down, I knew he didn't want me to feel confident. His jealousy showed itself in strange ways too. If I wore a dress he thought was too nice, he would ask why I needed to impress anyone. If I stayed late at the office, he hinted that I was using work as an excuse to avoid him. Once, when an old college friend messaged me to catch up, Ethan read too much into it and accused me of hiding things. Instead of arguing, I stopped talking to that friend altogether. Piece by piece, my world became smaller. Even in front of others, he had little ways of putting me down. At dinners, he would correct me on small details just to make me look forgetful. At family gatherings, he joked about me being too sensitive if I tried to defend myself. I would laugh it off, not wanting anyone to see tension between us. I told myself it was easier to stay quiet than to cause a scene. Looking back now, I can see how much I excused. I thought love meant being patient, forgiving, and understanding. I believed if I kept giving, he would see my loyalty and change. Instead, my silence only gave him more room to push me further down. The night of the gala wasn't an isolated outburst. It was the result of years of control, years of me shrinking myself to keep the peace. As I sat with those memories, I finally admitted to myself what I had been avoiding. The marriage had cracks from the very beginning. I had been patching them with hope, but the truth was clear. Those cracks had only widened until they finally broke open in front of everyone. Walking into the office after that night felt heavier than any Monday morning ever had. I carried the memory of being dragged out like a scene from a bad play, and the thought of my coworkers' eyes on me made my chest tighten. But the person I dreaded facing the most was Genevieve. She had seen everything, and I couldn't erase the image of her watching me while Ethan pulled me away. I kept my head down, moving quickly to my desk, hoping to blend in. My mind kept spinning with possibilities. Would she think I was unprofessional? Weak? Would this cost me opportunities one had worked so hard for? I told myself to focus on the projects waiting on my desk, but I couldn't even concentrate on the words in front of me. Every time I typed, I pictured her face at the gala. Later that afternoon, I heard my name. I turned and saw Genevieve standing by the door of her office, motioning for me to come in. My stomach flipped. I walked in slowly, trying to steady my breathing. She closed the door behind us, and I braced myself for the conversation I had been dreading. But instead of a lecture, her tone was gentle. She asked if I was all right, and that simple question nearly broke me. I nodded quickly, afraid that if I said more, my voice would crack. She didn't push, but she looked at me in a way that made me feel seen, really seen. Then she told me something I didn't expect, that I deserved better than what I had endured. Her words caught me off guard. She didn't mention embarrassment, reputation, or the scene that had played out. Instead, she spoke about me as a person. She reminded me that my work had been excellent, that my contributions mattered, and that no one should have the power to make me feel small, especially not someone who was supposed to care about me. I stood there stunned, feeling a rush of relief mixed with shame. Relief because she hadn't judged me as harshly as I had judged myself. Shame because the private chaos of my marriage had crossed into the one place I had managed to hold together. I hated that the two worlds had collided so publicly. Genevieve leaned forward and told me not to let anyone hold me back from the future I was building. She said talent and dedication were things no one could take away. Hearing that from her, a woman who had built her own path to the top, meant more than I could explain. When I left her office, I carried more than just comfort. I carried the reminder that I wasn't invisible, that others saw value in me even when Ethan tried to erase it. For the first time in a long while, I felt a spark of strength return, even if it was only a small one. That short conversation stayed with me, and though I didn't know it yet, it would be the start of something bigger. One night, long after Ethan had fallen asleep, I sat awake staring at the ceiling. My mind was restless, and the silence of the house only made the noise in my head louder. Then I heard it, a faint buzz on the nightstand. His phone lit up, and for a moment I told myself to ignore it. But something inside me couldn't let it go. I reached over and picked it up. The screen showed a string of messages, and curiosity turned quickly into dread. I unlocked it, and that's when the truth spilled out in front of me. There were messages from someone named Lauren. I recognized her name. She worked at his office, someone he had mentioned once or twice in passing. But the tone of the messages left no room for doubt. They weren't about work. They were intimate, filled with jokes, secrets, and plans. As I scrolled, my stomach sank lower and lower. This wasn't something new. It had been going on for months. The words cut sharper with every line I read. Lauren spoke about me, mocking my efforts to keep the marriage together. She laughed at how clueless I must be, bragging about the times Ethan had chosen her over coming home. Reading those words felt like being slapped. It wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation laid bare, proof that my trust had been treated like a joke. I sat frozen, the glow of the phone lighting up my face in the dark room. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to keep reading because I needed to know the truth, no matter how ugly it was. Their conversations revealed weekends he claimed to be working late, sudden trips he never explained, even nights he had picked fights with me just so he could leave the house. The puzzle pieces I had ignored now fit together with brutal clarity. Then it hit me. All those times he accused me of being too friendly, of looking for attention, of embarrassing him. It was never about me. He was deflecting, throwing his own guilt onto my shoulders. He had been living a double life, and to keep me off balance, he turned his own sins into my supposed flaws. The realization was like cold water poured over me. I placed the phone back on the nightstand, my hands trembling. Beside me, he slept soundly, unaware that his secrets had just unraveled in my hands. I lay back, staring into the dark, feeling a mixture of pain and clarity. The anger was sharp, but under it was something steadier, a recognition that I could no longer pretend. The truth was ugly, but at least now I had it. That night, the storm inside me settled into focus. Ethan thought he had me fooled, but all he had done was give me the proof I needed. He believed he was in control, but for the first time, I knew the power had shifted. The morning after I found those messages, I sat at the kitchen table waiting for Ethan to come downstairs. My hands were steady even though my heart was beating fast. When he finally walked in, sipping his coffee like nothing was wrong, I knew I couldn't keep quiet any longer. I asked him straight out about Lauren. His smile faded, and for a second he looked caught off guard. Then he let out a laugh, the kind he used when he wanted to make me feel silly. He claimed I was imagining things, said I was paranoid, and told me I shouldn't go through his phone. But I didn't raise my voice. I simply told him I had read the messages, every single one. The shift in his face was quick. Denial turned to anger. He slammed his cup on the counter and started yelling, accusing me of invading his privacy, twisting the blame to make me feel guilty. His words were sharp, but I didn't move from my chair. I let him rage, because deep down I knew his anger came from being exposed. Finally, when his shouting lost steam, he admitted it. Not with shame, but with a shrug. He said it just happened, like months of lying and sneaking around were some kind of accident. Then he tried to turn it on me, saying I hadn't been supportive enough, that I cared more about my job than about him. He painted himself as the one who had been neglected, as though betraying me was a reasonable reaction. Listening to him, I felt something inside me snap, not with noise, but with clarity. For years I had twisted myself into knots trying to understand him, to excuse his moods, to keep the peace. In that moment, I saw the truth without the fog. He was manipulative, selfish, and unfaithful. Nothing I could have done would ever have been enough for him, because the problem had never been me. I stood up slowly and looked at him, not with tears or pleading, but with a calm I hadn't felt in years. I told him I wasn't going to fight, and I wasn't going to beg for answers he didn't care to give. His face tightened, maybe expecting me to break down, but I didn't. I turned away, and for the first time, the silence between us felt like strength rather than defeat. That conversation wasn't loud or dramatic. It was simple, almost quiet, but it shifted everything. He wanted me to believe I was powerless, but all I saw was how little power he truly had once I stopped playing into his game. That morning, I decided I wouldn't let him define me any longer. I wasn't going to stay in the role of victim. I was done. After the truth came out, I knew I couldn't make decisions out of anger alone. If I confronted Ethan again without a plan, he would twist it, yell, and make me feel small all over. So I kept quiet and started working in silence. Every night, after he fell asleep, I stayed up with my laptop, reading articles and searching for advice. That's when I realized I needed more than just courage. I needed protection, and that meant talking to a lawyer. The first time I stepped into the attorney's office, I felt nervous, like I was betraying some secret vow. But as I sat there explaining everything, his temper, his control, the late-night messages, I realized this wasn't betrayal. It was survival. The lawyer listened, asked questions, and told me what documents I would need to move forward. For the first time, I felt like there was a clear path out of the mess. At home, I became careful. I copied bank statements, saved receipts, and kept screenshots of the messages between him and Lauren. I didn't rush. I moved slowly, like someone piecing together a puzzle. If Ethan suspected anything, I knew he would explode, and I wasn't ready for that yet. So I played the part he expected, quiet, obedient, going about my days as though nothing had changed. Inside, though, I was building something stronger than his anger, a plan he wouldn't see coming. During this time, Genevieve became more than just my boss. She noticed my focus at work, but she also noticed the weight I carried. One afternoon, she called me into her office again, not to talk about projects but about me. She told me she saw potential in me that I wasn't giving myself credit for. She spoke about her own past struggles, about the importance of never letting anyone define your worth. Her words gave me courage. It wasn't pity, it was belief. With her encouragement, I started to picture a different version of my life. A life where I didn't have to walk on eggshells. A life where I didn't measure my choices against someone else's moods. A life where my work, my friendships, and my own happiness were enough. That vision became my anchor on the hardest days. The silence at home grew heavier, but I didn't let it break me. When Ethan complained about bills or tossed out bitter remarks, I stayed steady, because I knew something he didn't. I was preparing my exit. Every file I tucked away, every note I made, was another step closer to freedom. I didn't tell anyone else, not even close friends. The fewer who knew, the safer I felt. My strength came from keeping the plan close to my chest. By the time it was ready, I knew I wouldn't just be leaving him. I would be walking into a life where I finally had control. I chose the day carefully, making sure everything was ready. The papers were signed, the evidence was in order, and there was no chance for him to twist things anymore. Instead of waiting at home, I went directly to his office. I wanted him to face the truth where he believed he was untouchable. When I walked through the glass doors, the receptionist gave me a polite smile, unaware of what I carried in my bag. My steps were calm, steady. I asked for Ethan, and within minutes he appeared, his confident expression still intact. He looked surprised to see me, but tried to cover it with a smirk. That smirk faded the second I handed him the envelope. He opened it right there in front of me. His hands trembled as his eyes scanned the first page. The air in the room shifted. A few of his co-workers had stopped nearby, curious about what was happening. The proud, polished man they admired every day suddenly looked small, his face draining of color. He muttered my name under his breath, but I didn't flinch. For once, I wasn't the one shrinking under pressure. He tried to speak quietly, asking me to step aside, but it was already too late. The whispers had begun, people leaning toward each other, trying to catch a glimpse of the papers in his hand. He had always cared so much about keeping a flawless image, and now it was crumbling in front of the very people he worked so hard to impress. I turned and walked out without giving him another word. My heels clicked against the floor, each step carrying me further from the cage I had lived in for years. The weight I had been carrying was gone. It wasn't sadness I felt, it was release. Not long after, I heard through mutual contacts that Lauren had left him. She had thought she was winning some prize, but she quickly realized she had been nothing more than a distraction for him. Without the stability of a wife at home, his life unraveled quickly. His shine faded, and so did the hold he once had over me. While his world cracked, mine began to grow. Work became a place where I could breathe again. I poured myself into projects, and with Genevieve's guidance, I found new confidence in my abilities. Opportunities opened, and I finally started to feel proud of my accomplishments without hearing his voice dragging me down. Outside of work, I reconnected with people I had pushed away and spent time doing things I once loved. The house felt brighter, the quiet no longer threatening. For the first time, I was living without fear of someone's outburst. Handing him those papers wasn't just ending a marriage, it was reclaiming myself. I had walked into his office carrying documents, but what I walked out with was freedom, dignity, and a future no one could take from me again. When I look back, I realized that night at the gala was not the end of me. It was the start of something I never imagined I had inside me. Ethan thought dragging me out in front of everyone would break me, that I would crawl back into silence, too ashamed to stand tall again. But what he didn't know was that moment became the push I needed to finally choose myself. The humiliation cut deep, yes, but it also peeled away the illusions I had been holding on to. I saw him for what he was, and I saw myself for who I could become without his shadow over me. Every tear I shed in the quiet of my room turned into fuel, reminding me I had survived worse storms and could survive this too. It wasn't easy to rebuild. There were days I questioned everything, if people judged me, if I had failed, if I should have stayed longer. But each step forward showed me that freedom isn't about pleasing others. It's about refusing to let someone else decide your worth. Slowly, the weight he had piled on me lifted, and I could breathe again. Work became more than a job. It was proof of my resilience. My boss believed in me, and for the first time, I started believing in myself too. I didn't just survive that marriage. I rose out of it stronger, sharper, and more aware of what I deserved. I wasn't just Ethan's wife anymore. I was Clara, a woman who had faced betrayal and turned it into power. People often think betrayal destroys you, but I learned it can also be a teacher. It shows you the cracks, forces you to confront hard truths, and gives you the choice to either sink or rise. I chose to rise. I chose to walk away with my dignity, my independence, and my future still intact. Now, when I stand in front of a mirror, I don't see someone broken. I see someone who walked through fire and came out unburned. The scars are there, but they remind me of battles I won, not losses I carry. I no longer live in fear of someone else's anger or control. I live on my own terms. Ethan's betrayal didn't ruin me, it freed me. He thought I would be small without him, but I became bigger than he could ever imagine. I found courage, peace, and a strength that was always there, just waiting to be uncovered. This is my new beginning, a chapter not defined by pain, but by survival, justice, and self-respect. I lost a marriage, but I gained myself. And that is the best victory I could have ever asked for.